Hola a todos. Welcome back to Taskmaster is Wonderful Podcast. I'm Eric, and today I'm talking about episode 1 of Dicho y Hecho. No sooner said than done. This was Spain's adaptation of Taskmaster way back in 2018. Unfortunately, only 5 of the 8 planned episodes made it to air, so we don't have an official winner, but hopefully it is still a lot of fun to watch. This season was led by La Jefa, the boss, Anabel Alonso, and her El Ayudante assistant, Jose Corbacho. It's a departure from other adaptations because they had 6 contestants and each episode is 2 hours long. We have our contestants, David Fernandez, he's an actor, comedian, and singer. Elena Furiase, she's an actor. Goizalde Núñez, she's an actor. Leonor Lavado, she's an actor, comedian, and YouTuber. Pablo Carbonell, singer, comedian, actor, and Secun de la Rosa, an actor and playwright. Before we get to the tasks, let's take a closer look at 2 of the contestants. First, David Fernandez. His longest running TV show was La Peluqueria, the barbershop. And then he is, from what I can tell, he is best known for his character Rodolfo Chicloquatra. It's a famous character who he played in the 2008 Eurovision Song Contest. His song was called Baila El Chiqui Chiqui, and his reggaeton style song is very weird. I just watched it. Go check it out. It's on the Eurovision YouTube channel. Elena Furiase, she's best known for starring as Vicky in El Internado, the boarding school. It's a teen drama thriller. She's been in many TV shows and films, but I was most interested in seeing that she competed on Spain's version of MasterChef Celebrity Series 4, just a year after Dicho y Hecho. So, like I said, a big difference here. It makes a much bigger difference than you would think it would to have 6 contestants instead of 5. Another big difference, they do not kick things off with the prize task. Instead, they kind of split up the other tasks with presenting a couple of them at a time throughout the 2 hours of the episode, which I think is kind of does a disservice to the people who go first, because by the time you get to the last person, it's well over an hour later. So I will go through those as they happen in the episode, but I'm going to have a hard time remembering the earlier ones as well. So instead of a prize task, we start with the first film task: paint a horse while on a horse. Of course, we saw this task in the original Taskmaster Series 1, Episode 1. Leonor and Secun are shown first. They are not carrying the paints with them on the horse, but instead have to ride over to the pallet and dip their brushes in there as they ride past. This seemed like it made it a lot harder than if they had the palette with them. So that they had to kind of think ahead, and then they were kind of stuck with whatever paint they had on each lap. So we see Secun's brown Demogorgon blob with 3 legs, and Leonor, she paints the butt, tail, and hind legs of the horse. She claimed that she was creating a different plane, a different perspective to look at the horse. Then we see Elena, who paints something that looks like it's on fire when she turns it upside down. She paints basically a brown, yellow, and red blob. Pablo gets bouncing a lot during this. He does paint a pretty good horse with a whole background and everything. The horse itself was just like a black outline of a horse, so I guess the actual part of the task wasn't that good. But then he realized after doing the painting that it didn't say specifically that you had to paint. It just said that you had to make the best portrait of a horse. And so he gets back on the horse and takes a picture with his phone and then posts it to Instagram with a bunch of stickers on it. Next, we see David, who really tries to brainstorm how to get around having to ride the horse. He eventually asks for a smaller horse, and then also works around the whole pallet having to ride by and dip into it by asking Corbacho to carry the paint beside him. He made a pretty good horse. He even had the green bridle on it. So his was really good, and Goizalde's was also very good. But she really goes out of the way to not ride a horse. She first asks the cameraman to become a horse, and then switches to miming riding a horse using one of the A-frames that was holding up the kind of work table with all the supplies on it. Her painting was messier than David's, but it was pretty good. It did get the green bridle and also kind of a red tongue. It seemed like everything bled together as if she had been actually riding a horse. Maybe she was miming the motion of a horse a little bit too much, that she got just as much bumpiness as if she was on horseback anyway. But Pablo gets the 6 points for his innovative photo technique. Goizalde gets 5 points. David gets 4. Elena gets 3. Leonor gets 2. And Secun gets 1 point. Then we see the first part of the prize task. 2 of them are presented. The prize category is the object that is most difficult to acquire. This seemed to have been interpreted in a few different ways, whether it was the most expensive, the most costly monetarily, or that it was just a very difficult task to obtain the item. David starts things off with the ashtrays from airplane armrests. He tells a story about how he stole them from a plane after smoking had been banished. Leonor has brought in a limited edition lithograph poster based on the show The Wire. It's I have not watched The Wire. I assume it's a rendition of one of the memorable buildings in the show. It is a pretty cool poster, but this was difficult for her to acquire because it was the last one at the store, and I guess she took it from a boy who was there. That reminds me real quick, the subtitles for this episode, I think they were just ran through Google Translate, because there are a bunch of words that are not translated, and also names like Leonor's last name is consistently translated as washing. So I think it was just copied in there. It was a little bit challenging at times, and super challenging for one of the tasks that we'll get to in a little bit. So there are some parts of this episode that I'm kind of iffy on of what they are talking about, mostly because of that. So apologies ahead of time, and for if it has already happened. Next up, we have the live task. They had to memorize the names of a rugby team, the names and numbers of a rugby team. And they all have to try to remember all of them, which I thought was pretty interesting. This is a version of the Australian football team name task from Series 1, Episode 4. They're in the same order that they are for the rest of the show, which means that Secun is way far away from Corbacho. And so he complains about that, saying that he can't hear all the names because by the time the people get to him, they're saying the names again over at the front of the line, and so he misses a whole bunch of them. They each try to name all 6 of them. It could have been that they would try to copy each other's answers, but I think it probably confused things more than helped. So only two of them had any of their name or numbers guessed, and we're left to wonder who that is. It turns out that three of them, three of the contestants, did not name anything correctly. Elena got one name but no numbers, so she got 4 points for being in third place. Leonora got two names and no numbers, so she got 5 points for being in second place. And despite all of his objections, and he didn't even try for the middle three people, but he totally nailed the first and the last person to get two names and two numbers. He gets the full 6 points. So at this point, I think that I like Secun de la Rosa the most out of everybody, and maybe Leonor second most. By the end of this episode, I feel like I've watched a whole season of this. And I do like all of them for different reasons. Next up, we have the second part of the prize task. Elena brings a Gitano Espanol dictionary. She is half Gitano, which is Spanish Romani, and she had been looking for a Calo dictionary and eventually found this one after years of searching. She mentions that she would love to have it back after the show if she doesn't win. Calo is a language spoken by the Spanish and Portuguese Romani. It is often used as an argot, which is a secret language for discreet communication amongst Iberian Romani. Catalan, Galician, and Portuguese and Spanish Calo are closely related varieties that share a common root. And then Secun has brought in an Alexander McQueen's jersey, or a sweater. This is another one of those stories that I didn't quite follow from the translation. But what I got from it is that he was visiting London and he had never worn any luxury brand stuff. And so this was his very first like luxury brand clothing item. And so he's really proud of getting it, and then it got stained by markers and it's like half faded red. And I was not familiar with Alexander McQueen. It is a British luxury fashion house that appears to still be in business. Next up, we had a task that nearly broke my brain. So find out about the Swedish person. This is a version of the task that we first saw in the original Taskmaster Series 2, Episode 1. Some differences with this one is that in the room, along with the Swedish person, on the table is a whole bunch of stuff. There's a whiteboard, a calculator, a phone, a Swedish dictionary, and a bell. And they do not have a specific list of things to find out. They just have to find out the most things about him. They're penalized if he answers them in Spanish, but he does understand them. So they don't have to worry about figuring out how to ask him the questions. So, after watching Bestie Tests Season 1, I thought it would be really fun to learn Swedish. So I've been doing that since like the end of January, and that's been pretty fun. But in this instance, it was kind of overload because I understand Spanish a tiny bit, and of course I speak English, and now I have a little bit of understanding of Swedish. And so hearing him speak Swedish, but having Spanish subtitles, and then hearing the contestants speak Spanish, but with the English subtitles, and the English subtitles aren't necessarily all that great. And then you add the other layer the translator that they can summon to come help them. It was a lot. The part that got me the most was so Leonor was doing really well, asking her a bunch of questions, and she asks about his dogs. And he says one of his dogs is named Poika and the other is named Flika. And those are the words for boy and girl. And I wasn't really sure if he was saying that his dogs were a boy and a girl or that those were the names of them. So I had to go back and watch that a couple of times, and he was naming them. Oh my gosh. It was really interesting to watch. It was just very challenging, and I kind of felt like I needed a nap afterwards. Anyways, Leonor is shown first. She does pretty well, asking all kinds of family questions. She uses the phone book to kind of come up with ideas of what his profession might be, and then she eventually figures out, she thinks that she figures out that he is an Uber driver. His actual profession is translator, which I think is another really funny layer. So Secun, he asks him to draw something for him. It looked like a rocket, and that throws everything off. And eventually, right at the very end, he's like, "Oh, you know all language. You're a machine that knows Swedish and Spanish." So he just about got it, right? But only that one piece of information. Elena uses all kinds of methods to determine such facts as he has not killed somebody with a gun. She determines that he isn't gay because she drew a man and a woman with a heart between them, and he said yes to that. He's not allergic. He likes Chinese food, and he says no to Hitler. So quite a bit of information extracted by Elena. Then we had Pablo about halfway through his time. They have 20 minutes to get as much information as they can. He realizes that the dictionary is a Swedish dictionary. So he calls a school of languages. The first number that Siri calls is not active. He rings the bell for the translator when he finds the note on the bottom of the bell. And she comes in, tries to help him, but she can only translate to Chinese. And that is not useful at all. Super, super funny. David also figures out that he can summon the other translator. But then he calls the Chinese restaurant that's on the menu, another one of the items on the table, and he asks someone there to translate what she's saying. And eventually they're like, we're busy, we can't really talk anymore. So he fails pretty miserably. He really gets hung up on trying to communicate with her instead of the Swedish men. So he gets barely more information than Secun does. And then we have Goizalde, who calls her Swedish friend named Cesar Sarachu, and she asks a whole bunch of questions, but somehow does not ask as many as Elena was able to. So Elena, with the most information, got 6 points. Goizalde gets 5. Leonor gets 4. Pablo gets 3. David gets 2. And Secun gets 1 point. Then we see the third part of the prize task. Goizalde brings in a certificate that her hometown gave her. This is the Tomato of Honor, to kind of show how proud they were of her being an actor and stuff. The Tomatera. Next up, we had a live task, another live task. Pop up the tent, put on the onesie, the fastest wins. We saw this as the very first live task of the original Taskmaster Series 1, Episode 1. Pablo sings the task instructions out. That was very fun. It was frantic, but it does seem that everybody mostly has a handle on what's going on. Nobody's trying to cheat by just standing behind the tent or anything like that. Everybody does actually get inside of them. Goizalde gets 6 points for finishing first. David gets 5. Pablo gets 4. Elena and Secun are so close together that they are rewarded 3 points each. And Leonor never gets out of the tent From what I could tell, she was maybe trying to change out of her clothes and then get into the pajamas because she says, don't lift it up because I'm naked." Kind of bonkers. Next up, we have knock over all of the ducks. We saw this in the original series 4, episode 1. It's the same sort of setup. We had 2 kind of sections of fence that have a line of ducks on top of each of them, and then 1 little row of ducks on the ground. Elena is shown first. She attempts to build a slingshot out of a couple of long cardboard tubes and a bungee cord. That does not work very well, and she just ends up throwing a bunch of stuff. She takes 3 minutes and 15 seconds, but it's shown that she crossed the imaginary line many times. Then we had Leonor. She was shown at the same time as Elena. She just throws a whole bunch of stuff. She takes 4 minutes and 34 seconds. Then we see all of the men. Pablo and David both grab a hose. It is not effective at all. They just get everything wet. Secun grabs a leaf blower. It is even less effective than the hose was. All very, very bad. They finally get second attempts going, and then their clocks finally start. I think that's how it works, is that those really bad first attempts didn't affect anything because they didn't knock anything down. So Pablo, he makes a really long pole and then ties a rope to the furthest wall to pull that down. He takes 2 minutes and 58 seconds, but he knocked a duck off when he was attaching the rope. He does end up having that excused because it was an accidental. David's, he attaches the hose that he was using for the water. So he uses that a rope, and he pulls all of those walls down. He did have a faster time than Pablo, but he accidentally kicked some of the ducks, so he was penalized a little bit for that. Then Secun, after a lot of consultation from Corbacho, he basically just ends up throwing a whole bunch of stuff. And then finally, we see Goizalde, who reads, thinks, and acts accordingly. She moves the rope barrier itself over to the fence so that she can easily reach it, knock off all those ducks. And then she moves the rope barrier again to the further fence, knock those off, quick and easy, 1 minute and 15 seconds. She gets 6 points. Pablo gets 5 points after being forgiven for that accidental single duck. David gets 4 points. Leonor gets 3. Elena gets 2. And Secun gets 1. That brings us to the final section of the prize task. We see Pablo's contribution. It is a statue from Tanzania of a man doing an enema. It was difficult for him to obtain it because it was very expensive. They quoted a large price to him. He tried to send his friend, who is thinner than he is, and they said that they had reserved it for a fat guy. So the boss, Anabel, ranks the prizes. Leonor gets 6 points for her poster of The Wire. Pablo gets 5 points for that statue of the enema. Goizalde gets 4 points for her Tomato of Honor certificate. Secun gets 3 points for his Alexander McQueen sweater. Elena gets 2 points for her Gaetano Espanol dictionary. And I think David is lucky to get even 1 point for his illegally ascertained airplane armrest ashtrays. The final filmed task of the episode is choreograph a dance to a ringtone. We first saw this task in the UK, Series 4, Episode 4. So part of this is that Corbacho is their dancing partner, and everybody utilizes him very, very well. Elena does a chicken dance over a footage of a chicken farm. All the cute little chicks in that chicken farm. They fall in love, and then they both produce eggs. Pablo does a rap video sort of thing representing the Zulus with some tribe dancing, and then they end up playing basketball, but they're dressed in like kind of hip hop clothes, like they're doing a hip hop video or something. Secun uses a typewriter as a prop and creates a Dicho y Hecho music video, the song of the summer. I thought at first that Anabel did not like it, but she actually ended up loving it. I think him performing it in the studio put it over the top. Yeah, that was really fun. Leonor creates a sort of like 80s like sweat dance routine, and they both fall backwards into the green screen and like knocking it over. David creates a sort of story about an astronaut and an alien on Mars. Astronaut like teaches him how to have feelings and stuff like that. I kind of understood it. Anabel did not understand it at all. Goizalde creates Jota fusion, mixing traditional roots with gin. Corbacho chimes in. So I did not know very much about Jota. The Jota is a genre of music and the associated dance known throughout Spain, most likely originating in Aragon. The Jota is danced and sung accompanied by castanets, and the interpreters tend to wear regional costumes. It's usually in 3/4 or 6/8. For the ringtone, it totally makes sense that she did this style of dance and the style of dress that they were in. They used the Nokia ringtone, but it was like a classical, fully instrumentated version of it. I don't think it was the full original song, Grand Vals, composed by Francisco Tárrega in the 19th century, because it was mostly just that melody and then some of the background and stuff. There's some great YouTube videos talking about the origin of the Nokia ringtone. Oh, and Francisco Tárrega is a Spanish composer. So the points for that task: 6 points to go to Secun for creating that song of the summer about Dicho y Hecho. Then we have 5 points to Elena, 4 points to Pablo, 3 points to Leonor, 2 points for Goizalde, and 1 point for David because she didn't get it at all. Then the final live task, another song, perform a song about a stranger. So they have this stranger come out, and Corbacho asks her a whole bunch of questions that everybody can take notes on to create their verse of the song. They have 10 seconds each to improvise a verse to the tune of Los Parajitos, or the chicken dance song, that song, using the answers that have been obtained. Her name is Lady Madeline Muffin from Liverpool. She loves gin. Gin keeps coming up in this episode, and a bunch of other stuff. I'm not going to try to recreate any of the things that they said, because it was a lot. Some of it didn't actually have subtitles, so I just had to kind of go by how much I enjoyed each of their verses. I thought the music was very fast for what they had to do. Pablo was very bad musically at it. Leonor, I thought, was amazing compared to everybody else. Secun, I think, was doing really well, except that he kept cracking up, and that disrupted his flow quite a bit. But Anabel enjoyed all of it and gave 6 points to everyone for this final live task. So the scores for the episode: David in last place with 22 points. Secun had 28 points. Leonor had 30 points. Elena, 31 points. Pablo with 33. And the winner was Goizalde with 34 points. She wins all of the hard to obtain stuff. And I'd say all of these items were made even more difficult to obtain because you also had to win an episode of Dicho y Hecho. That is it for this first episode of Dicho y Hecho. It was a big challenge for a bunch of the reasons that I talked about. But man, I am bummed out that they didn't just finish the season. So from what I've read, it was canceled mid-season because of the viewing figures. And if I had to guess, a big part of that had to be the 2-hour runtime. That is a lot to ask of any TV show. That's a huge time commitment. So anyway, I am going to watch the remaining 4 episodes. I am looking forward to it. Let me know what you thought about this episode by tweeting me at TIW Podcast. Go to TIWpodcast.com for more episodes. Big shout out to taskmaster.info. It's helped fill in a lot of the gaps to figure out some of the stuff that is going on and all of the scores. So go check out taskmaster.info for all of your stats needs across all of the different international taskmasters. Awesome site. Of course, you can subscribe to this show over on iTunes, on Spotify, or your podcatcher of choice. You can find all those links at tiwpodcast.com. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time here on Taskmaster is Wonderful Podcast. Bye.